Hello, let's talk about why you should never ask people or anyone for advice. Why? Because you should know what you want. You should never ask anyone about your life, your work, your activities, because the people that you're asking, they're not gonna know what you want. And when they don't know what you want, their advice is not going to be good for you. Good advice is context specific, and people giving the advice should know what you want. But even then, the advice is still not good, and here's why. So when you ask for advice, a lot of people are actually giving you assumptions. They're giving you their blind spots. They're giving you things that shape their reality and shape their time. So when you ask people for advice such as, how to study, for example, or how to study for tests. The thing is that they might have had a different professor, they might have had a different way to test, the proctoring system might have been different. So that's why you should never do that. However, there are two ways to get good advice. So the first one is actually by asking people and not necessarily taking their advice word for word, but asking a lot of advice and taking the advice very carefully. By understanding the underlying assumptions, the underlying blind spot, and how they actually got to that conclusion. So if I tell you, you studied by this test by reading this part or the textbook, for example. Okay, so the beneficial part of that answer is actually understanding how the person got to that conclusion. Okay, so if you're saying, if you should study for a test or need a textbook, why do you say that? Then the advice becomes really useful. The second part is that when you're asking for advice in anything, when you're thinking about anything, it's more important, instead of like going through, let's start thinking. It's actually more important if you ask yourself how to think about the problem. We should be spending more time about how to think about something than actually thinking about it. Because if the framing isn't right, you're automatically going to get, or you're most likely to get a wrong answer. But if you frame the question in the right way, then you're more likely to find the correct answer. So for example, instead of saying, how can I study for a test? If you put more time into that question, you can actually get to the conclusion that you might say, how can I study for my math test? And the deeper conclusion would be, how can I study for my calculus exam about integrals? So the question would be, advice would be, so you want to know integrals, therefore you should do problems. Okay, why should you do problems? Because whatever, so you get the idea. So the reason why you should never ask for advice is that people giving it to you don't know what you want. And if you don't know what you want, you are outsourcing your life, your desires, your motive to other people, which is not gonna be so great. So before you ask for advice, you should know what you want. If you don't know what you want, that's a thing for another video. So thank you so much.